In the past 2 weeks, the United States and Israel have almost completely destroyed the country of Iran. Ayatollah Khamenei is gone, and Iran's military seems to have fallen apart and lost its direction. Whatever happens in the coming days, one thing is clear. The future of the Middle East has already changed. At the tactical level of battle, Washington and Jerusalem have already achieved a significant victory. They now control nearly all the airspace over much of Iran's territory. They can strike almost any target whenever they want, wherever they want, and with any weapon of their choosing. After decades of tension and what is called a regional Cold War, it seems that Israel is gradually crushing its longtime enemy. Meanwhile, the United States is extremely confident in its strength, which is why Donald Trump immediately declared victory. However, victory on the battlefield is not enough to say that the war has been won. At present, there is a huge gap between the tactical domination of the United States and Israel and the true strategic victory they want to achieve. After 2 weeks of relentless bombing, the Islamic Republic of Iran still stands, and the idea of regime change seems to have become even more unclear. The strait is still closed, and the entire Middle East, especially the wealthy countries in the Gulf, continues to be under the threat of possible attacks. The new supreme leader of Iran is also not showing any signs of compromise. In fact, many say he is even more stubborn. Compared to his father, he is even more firm in his stance. And if you look at the statements from Iran in recent days, it's clear that they have no intention of backing down. If you quickly look at the news, it's easy to see that almost every day the United States, Israel, and their allies are winning most of the battles. But when it comes to the bigger question, who is really winning the war? That's difficult to answer. But before we start that, if you're new to our channel, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll stay updated with videos like this. The case for the coalition. When countries go to war, what really is the measure of success? War is definitely not a simple competition. It's not like a contest where whoever kills more enemies or hits more targets goes home with a trophy and the right to brag. In reality, war is the means to achieve a goal. Countries go to war because there is something they want to obtain, something they are willing to fight for, and on the other side, their enemy has the opposite goal that they are also ready to defend. An army may dominate the battle, it may greatly surpass the enemy's capabilities, but if its soldiers go home and the war ends without achieving the goal for which they fought, it still cannot be considered a victory. On the other hand, the opposite can also happen. An army may lose in war, suffer severe damage, and lose more personnel and equipment than the enemy. But if in the end they still achieve the goal for which they fought, they can still consider it a victory. We are not making this episode to take one side or the other. It is also not our intention to tell the supporters of the US president and the president of Israel or the government of Iran that the side they support is headed for certain defeat. The only question we want to answer is simple. Who is really winning? For now, there is still no clear answer. The fighting continues, and each side still has a chance to achieve their main objectives. The best thing we can do now is to present each side's arguments as to why they claim to have the upper hand, and why we should think carefully before immediately believing those statements. Let's start with the side of the United States and Israel coalition. The simplest argument for why Washington and Jerusalem are said to be winning is their tremendous success at the tactical level of the war. According to their report, in their air campaign, they have killed dozens of Iranian leaders as well as thousands of soldiers and paramilitary forces. A large part of Iran's navy has been sunk at sea, and most of their air power has almost been wiped out in the skies. A large part of Iran's military infrastructure has also been destroyed or severely damaged, while the air defense systems of the United States and Israel have shown a high level of success in defending their airspace. Because of this, they have gained almost complete control of the skies, to the point where heavy American bombers can fly over Iran with almost no opposition. On the side of the United States, fewer than 10 of their soldiers have been killed at the time of writing this report. In Israel, the deaths of 2 soldiers and 16 civilians have been confirmed. And although both sides have suffered damage to their military equipment, they have still inflicted greater damage on Iran compared to the combined damage received by America. At present, Iran cannot challenge the air power of the coalition. It also cannot drag the United States and Israel into an expensive ground war. The United States and Israel may not have achieved all of their objectives yet. However, whatever you call this situation, it's clear that they are not the ones losing. If we examine the main objectives that Israel and the United States seem to be pursuing, these include the overthrow of the current regime in Iran, the elimination of any threat from Iran against Israel and the entire Middle East, and ultimately, the termination of Iran's nuclear program. At present, there is real confusion about what exactly the coalition's objectives are in this war, especially on the part of the United States. However, the general direction is clear. There will be no more Ayatollahs who will threaten Israel, the United States, or their allies in the future. Despite all the damage they have caused, the United States and Israel are still not much closer to achieving those objectives compared to where they were 2 weeks ago. And perhaps more worryingly, it's still unclear how they will ultimately achieve those goals. For example, regime change. Depending on who you ask, there are days when the leaders of the coalition say this is the main goal of the war, and there are days when they say it isn't. But in the simplest explanation, they want to make sure that Iran will be led by people who will no longer be a threat in the future. But even after the former supreme leader of Iran was eliminated, along with perhaps his inner circle and allies within the government, things have not become more moderate. This is the new leadership of Iran. In fact, the new supreme leader of Iran, Mujtaba Khamenei, is even more hardline than his father. According to reports from both Iranian and Israeli sources, he was directly elevated to power by the powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and he is now the chosen leader of a faction in Iran that is among the fiercest and most intense opponents of the United States and Israel in the entire country. The coalition still has options to achieve regime change in Iran, but those methods seem to be losing effectiveness. For example, the United States could eliminate Mujtaba Khamenei, then his successor, and then the next one, until they reach a leader who is willing to cooperate or compromise, similar to what happened with Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. However, according to the President of the United States himself, most of the people who could possibly be installed by the United States in such a position have already been eliminated in the initial waves of airstrikes. At the start of the war, there were also many speculations that the people of Iran might turn against their government. In fact, Israel has already tried to prepare for that possibility. They bombed police stations and internal security facilities, and they also reportedly distributed weapons and small drones to lay the groundwork for a possible uprising. However, up to now, this has still not happened. Part of the reason is that the extent of the destruction is not yet enough for ordinary Iranians to risk uprisings against their leaders. And part of it is also because the president of Israel is calling for a popular uprising too early, before the necessary conditions for it to be possible have even formed. When reports come out from inside Iran, they show that ordinary citizens are also gradually losing trust in the leadership of the United States and Israel, as well as in their ability to achieve their main objectives. And although it is also possible for the coalition to support a ground invasion led by Kurdish forces, the element of surprise for such an operation is now gone. According to a Reuters report, U.S. intelligence determined just a few days ago, even after almost 2 weeks of continuous bombing, the regime of Iran is still not in danger of collapsing. Meanwhile, the coalition forces also failed to prevent some of Iran's most important attacks. Iran's missile and especially drone strikes continue against important economic and infrastructural targets throughout the Middle East. This caused significant damage and temporary shutdowns of refineries and natural gas facilities in countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Oman. Iran also succeeded in closing the Strait of Hormuz, where most ships refused to pass through that route. And as a result, energy prices around the world suddenly skyrocketed. In less than 2 weeks, the world was forced to release almost 400 million barrels of oil reserves, the largest market intervention in history, to prevent a full-blown global economic crisis. The coalition also failed to locate or destroy Iran's secret stockpiles of long-range drones, the very weapons that allow Iran to continue its destructive attacks. This means that even though Iran suffered the most severe damage in the war, it can still threaten the entire region, cause chaos in global trade, and manipulate the global energy market. For now, there are still other ways for the United States and Israel to escalate. They could launch a ground operation, possibly limited, such as an assassination mission or seizing the economically important Karg Island. They could also deploy large numbers of troops to the border to create the threat of a bigger attack. They could also target infrastructure that runs the Iranian government system, like what the coalition did on March 11th when they destroyed a data center that supported the bank used by Iranian forces to receive their salaries. But even if they do all of this, there's no guarantee that it will collapse immediately, especially since there's no certainty that it will happen in a short period of time. In fact, the support for the Trump administration's operation, whether inside America or abroad, is steadily weakening. According to the latest public opinion surveys, most Americans are really opposed to the war. On the global level, Emmanuel Macron said in a video call with the G7 leaders that no one can really say what US President Donald Trump truly wants to achieve in the ongoing war against Iran. According to some Israeli sources, Jerusalem is also preparing for the possibility that the United States might suddenly withdraw from the war without achieving additional objectives. And if that happens now, there's a strong possibility that Israel will also be forced to gradually end its own operations. And this is where the important question comes in. If the United States withdraws from the war in the coming days and the situation remains as we see it now, can that really be considered a victory? A case for Iran. If we look at the situation from Iran's perspective, we will notice that the things that favor the coalition are also the things that become problems for Iran, and vice versa. Despite everything, it is clear that Iran is currently suffering greatly from the war. Their leadership before the war began has almost been wiped out. Their military has weakened and their long-standing economic problems are getting even worse. But unlike the United States and Israel, Iran's main objective in this war is different. Their goal is to survive and continue. At present, the Islamic Republic of Iran still stands. And even though it is clear that they made mistakes in their attacks against the Gulf states and other governments in the region, their main strategy in the war against the West still seems to be working. Iran's missiles, drones, and sea mines have truly caused the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And by doing so, they have managed to hold the global economy hostage. If Iran's goal in this war is to achieve the same standards of victory pursued by America or Israel, it can be said that their performance has been very poor. But that is not their goal. They have their own set of objectives, and because of this, a different standard is used to measure their success or failure. For Iran, the most important objective is the survival of their state. Not just the safety of the state, not the leader or some officials, but the Islamic Republic itself. And for now, it still stands. However, there's a big problem for Iran. The war is not over yet. Because Iran's goal is to preserve something, not to destroy something, they can only say they have succeeded when the war is over. Meanwhile, although Iran has not been completely defeated, even though much of their military capability has been destroyed, the truth is they are gradually losing the ability to control when they will be defeated. If they can no longer decide when the battle will end and they are already in the middle of the war, only one option remains for them, and that is to hold on tightly and hope that the time will come when the coalition gets tired or decides that the cost of the war is too high to continue. Iran is trying to inflict costs and pressure on the coalition. That is exactly why they closed the Strait of Hormuz and carried out attacks in various parts of the Middle East. However, due to the severe damage that Iran has suffered, their ability to exert this kind of pressure is gradually weakening. In fact, no one outside of Iran really knows exactly how many weapons Iran has left. And at this stage of the war, it's also possible that even the leaders of Iran themselves are no longer sure how much capability they have left. But one thing is really clear, their arsenal is limited. They only have a limited number of missiles, drones, and launchers, as well as personnel trained to use them. Every time Iran launches weapons, they're not just attacking, they're also exposing their launch sites and infrastructure. And that means every use of missiles or drones reveals locations that can be tracked, targeted, and ultimately destroyed by their enemies. In other words, the more Iran uses its weapons, the more they put their remaining fighting capability at risk. And as we've already seen, Iran is capable of causing damage to targets in the Middle East if they want to. However, their strategy is more effective when their military capabilities serve as a threat, not when they are constantly used as actual weapons of destruction. For example, if the war ends tomorrow and Iran still has missiles, drones, and forces left, they can immediately use these to threaten the entire region again. But there really is a problem. Their enemies know this, and so do the countries that could possibly become targets. According to some reports from Gulf countries, even though there is resentment among some governments in the region because of the decision by the United States and Israel to put regional security at risk, their calls are still very clear. If you start the war, make sure you finish it. For Washington, Jerusalem, and the broader Western world, their calculations are almost the same. This war could have been avoided, and up to now, there is still debate about whether the decision to start it was right. But at this point, the worst possible thing that could happen for the coalition is to retreat. If that happens, Iran's regime will remain standing. An even stronger and more radical government will become more solid. And Iran's entire strategy of creating chaos in the region will be proven effective. And that means the new leadership, which is even more extremist, will likely further strengthen their strategy for the next stages of the conflict. And just think about the implications this will have on Iran's ambition to acquire nuclear weapons, when even their conventional weapons alone are already able to cause this much chaos around the world. So even though there's an argument that Iran could declare victory if the United States and Israel decide to end the war now, it's also possible that Iran could end up worsening its own situation. They may have created conditions where the coalition can no longer simply stop their operations while Iran's regime remains standing. If we go back to the question that started this episode, who is really winning the war against Iran? Honestly, there is still no clear argument that says either side is winning. However, the exact situation of the current deadlock opens up a more dangerous question. Is Iran heading towards an endless war? A war that neither the United States, Israel, nor anyone else really wants to happen. At this point, the coalition has really gone deep into this war. And if the situation still doesn't change, it seems they will have a hard time ending the conflict as long as the Islamic Republic of Iran continues to exist. Because if that happens, it's like they're proving that Iran's entire geopolitical strategy is correct, while leaving the country in the hands of an even more dangerous set of leaders. But the Islamic Republic of Iran also can't just back down. After all, their main goal in this war is the very survival of their state. And that means surrendering or compromising under any circumstances is something they absolutely cannot do. At this point, both sides have already lost some important options. For Iran, their missiles, drones, and launchers are gradually running out. And in addition, the patience and acceptance of many countries in the Arab world for their actions have also been exhausted. However, on the other side, it seems that the United States and Israel have also lost some opportunities. The opportunity to spark a major revolution inside Iran has already passed, and the element of surprise for a possible Kurdish offensive has also been lost. And the possibility of installing an Iranian leader who is willing to cooperate with the West has also failed. And as Donald Trump himself explained it last Monday, we already have many ways in which we have won, but it's still not enough. And a situation like this is not easy to resolve. This is not a situation where either side can simply withdraw and then declare victory, even if the reality on the battlefield is different. Instead, a situation like this is a recipe for a longer and more complicated war. A war that neither side really expected at first. A war where no one is really ready to win yet. And in the end, a war where it's possible that everyone loses.